There are moments when you don't need to look for signs anymore. You only need to listen to the way everything around you is slowing down. Libra has always known how to keep the rhythm of the world, keeping the peace, keeping things balanced. But when you find yourself slowing down longer than usual, that isn't by accident. Tomorrow brings a piece of information, not to shake your life, not to create chaos, but to restore order inside you. This truth doesn't knock loudly. It doesn't demand attention. It shows up right when you no longer feel the need to convince yourself of anything. And the moment that makes you go quiet isn't because you're surprised. It's because, deep down, you've always known this was something you would eventually have to face. So let's begin with the very first sign, the one that's been quietly guiding you here all along. Before tomorrow truly arrives, there is a moment that's hard to name, one that Libra often senses first, not through thinking, not through clear emotion, but through something thin, almost weightless, like stepping into a familiar room and realizing the light feels different today. Everything is still there. Nothing looks dramatically changed. Yet you know you are no longer standing in the same place you were before. Libra is used to observing, watching people, reading the air, noticing the smallest shifts that even those involved may never see. And because of that, when something inside begins to rearrange itself, you are often the first to feel it. No noise, no warning signs, just a quiet movement, as if the pieces of your life are slowly finding their proper places again. This feeling doesn't resemble anxiety because your heart doesn't race. It doesn't feel like anticipation either because you're not waiting for anything specific to happen. It feels more like a natural pause, a moment where you stop pushing yourself to understand everything right away. You begin to accept that some answers don't come from thinking harder, but from allowing things to reveal themselves in their own time. In moments like these, Libra often grows quieter than usual, not because you're shutting down, but because you're listening to what hasn't been said, listening to details you once overlooked, while trying so hard to keep everything balanced. It could be a look you once thought meant nothing, a sentence from the past, suddenly returning with a different meaning, or simply the sense that some things can no longer be understood the way they once were. This sign doesn't arrive to unsettle you. It doesn't force you into immediate action. It's simply there, clear enough that you can't ignore it, gentle enough that you don't feel pushed anywhere, like standing at a familiar crossroads and realizing for the first time that you're allowed to pause a little longer before moving on. Sometimes Libra's intuition doesn't speak loudly. It speaks through calm, a quiet knowing that you don't need to rush toward conclusions and you don't need to protect yourself with old explanations anymore. You just stay present, watching how things begin to connect, forming a pattern you've never noticed before. And maybe it's within this silence that you start to understand that an upcoming piece of information isn't meant to disrupt your life, but to clarify something that has been there for a very long time. The sign that comes first isn't a warning. It's a gentle preparation, helping you receive the truth with steadier ground beneath your feet. Not everyone notices this moment, and it doesn't always show itself clearly. But when Libra feels themselves slowing down, naturally, when you stop trying to explain everything into sense, that's often when life is whispering that something is about to be spoken, not to force change, but to offer you the chance to see things as they truly are, perhaps for the very first time, fully and without distortion. When important news arrives, it rarely chooses a loud moment. It doesn't wait for a stage. It doesn't ask for the attention of a crowd. For Libra, the most meaningful information in life often shows up when you're simply living. An ordinary day, nothing remarkable about it. A conversation meant to be polite. A small gesture you might have overlooked before. There's no ringing alarm, no lingering tension in the air. Just a very human moment. So natural. You don't even brace yourself for it. And because of that, it goes straight to your awareness. No detours. Not the kind of news that leaves you stunned, but the kind that makes you fall silent longer than you expected. Libra has always known how to read between the lines. You don't just hear the words. You notice where someone pauses mid-sentence. You don't just observe actions. You sense what's standing behind them. So when this information arrives, you realize it doesn't need emphasis. Its presence alone already carries enough weight. Maybe it's a sentence spoken softly, but this time, you're not listening out of habit. You're listening with the clarity of someone who has been through enough cycles to recognize what truly matters. Maybe it's a choice made instead of an explanation. No arguments, no persuasion, just a quiet understanding where things suddenly make sense without needing proof. What's striking is that this news doesn't demand a reaction from you. It doesn't corner you into answering. It doesn't force a decision. It doesn't ask you to justify anything. It simply places a truth in front of you and lets you notice where you stand within it. And that lack of pressure is exactly why you can't dismiss it. For many people, important news comes with urgency, with the question of what to do next. But for Libra, this moment carries a different tone. It's like finishing a short passage, then closing the book, because you realize you need time to sit with it, not because it's heavy, but because it touches something honest inside you. You may start to see that some things you once held together through accommodation and softness no longer fit the way they used to. Not because someone else was wrong, not because you were more right, but simply because you now see your own boundaries clearly. And that news, in its quiet way, confirms that understanding for you. Libra is no stranger to postponing difficult truths. You often choose more time, more harmony, another chance, for things to settle on their own. But when this information appears, you sense that you no longer want to delay, not out of exhaustion, but out of respect for the truth that's been placed before you. What gives this news its weight isn't its content. It's the feeling that follows. The feeling that you don't need to retell the story to yourself. One more time, you no longer wonder whether you imagine things or read too much into them. Clarity arrives quietly, but it's strong enough to close the loops that have been spinning for far too long. And maybe this is where Libra begins to understand that not everything in life needs a public announcement to become a turning point. Some things only need to be acknowledged at the right moment with just enough honesty. That news doesn't come to push you forward faster. It comes to allow you to stop standing still in a place that no longer belongs to you. When truth arrives, it doesn't always look like a major revelation. It doesn't shock you on the spot. It doesn't force words out of your mouth. For Libra, truth often comes like just enough light, falling into corners you've passed by many times, but never truly stopped to face. There are questions you never turn into words, not because they don't matter, but because you've learned how to live alongside them. They stay with you quietly over the years, showing up in small decisions, in the distance you keep, in the moments you choose silence instead of speaking. And then one day, not because you go searching for answers, but because you've grown calm enough to stop avoiding them. Truth naturally takes shape. What's revealed isn't trying to change you. It carries no judgment. It simply stands there, like a mirror cleaned, after being covered in dust for far too long. When you look into it, Libra doesn't see something completely new. You just see more clearly what you've felt for a long time, but never gave a name to. The hesitation that once slowed you down no longer feels as heavy. It begins to take form. It gains boundaries. You understand why you once paused, why you weighed things so carefully, and why certain choices kept bringing you back to the same place. Not because you lacked decisiveness, but because you were always trying to keep everything in balance, even when that meant setting yourself aside. As truth becomes clearer, Libra doesn't feel the need to fix the past. You don't feel compelled to prove whether you were right or wrong. A very particular sense of relief appears, not because everything is resolved, but because you're no longer arguing with yourself. The old questions don't disappear, but they stop pulling you off course. This moment carries a deeply human realization. Not every answer needs to arrive early. Some things can only be understood after you've gone far enough to look back without carrying defense with you. And maybe it's Libra's patience with the unclear spaces in life that allows you to receive truth more gently than others. You begin to notice connections between experiences that once felt unrelated, choices you thought were random, moments you chose silence instead of explanation, times you accepted temporary imbalance to keep peace for someone else. All of it slowly links together, not to justify your past, but to help you see how consistently you've lived by your deeper values. This truth doesn't push you to change immediately. It makes no demands. It simply invites you to look directly at what is present with respect for yourself. And in that moment, Libra may realize that understanding what caused so much hesitation for so long is already a meaningful step forward. Some people believe truth always comes with pain, but Libra's experience suggests otherwise. Truth, when received at the right time, can bring steadiness. It helps you stop blaming yourself. It helps you stop trying to become a version of yourself that's easier for others to accept. It allows you to stand more firmly in your own space. And perhaps the most important thing truth offers isn't a specific answer, but the feeling that you no longer have to doubt your own intuition. What once felt uncertain is no longer vague. It has shape now, clear enough for you to move forward without needing to look back. So many times, the moment of stillness doesn't arrive as an impulsive reaction. It doesn't spill out as words. It doesn't show itself on your face. For Libra, it's a very particular state when everything inside you slows down for a while, like the surface of a lake, settling after a light wind has passed. You're not trying to stay calm. You're not trying to appear strong. The quiet comes naturally, as if both your body and your mind have agreed that this is the moment to pause. Libra has spent a lifetime responding quickly, reading the room, adjusting emotions, soothing tension before it has a chance to spread. But in this moment, you no longer feel the need to do that. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've learned that not everything requires a response. To prove that you are present, this silence doesn't carry the feeling of turning away. It feels more like a deliberate break, a space where you allow what you've just seen to exist fully without being interrupted by assumptions or explanations. You don't rush to label your emotions. You don't force yourself to feel a certain way. You simply stay there long enough for the truth to reveal its own weight. Within that stillness, a very subtle shift takes place. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic. You're no longer pulled into the spiral of right and wrong. You begin to see things from a distance that feels just right, where emotion no longer overwhelms understanding. This doesn't come from numbness. It comes from experience, from learning that rushed reactions often make us miss what matters most. For Libra, this quiet moment is a sign of inner maturity. It's when you realize that understanding something deeply often takes more time than agreeing or arguing ever could. You no longer feel pressure to speak up just to hold your place. There's no need to prove that you've seen it, that you know, that you understand. Understanding, at this stage, doesn't need an audience. Others may not notice what's happening inside you. They may only see that you've grown quieter. But you know, this isn't withdrawal. This is how you protect what truly matters to you by not spending energy on unnecessary reactions. You allow things to remain still long enough to show their true nature instead of being distorted by momentary emotion. This moment also carries a deeply human value. It reminds you that maturity isn't about always having answers, but about being able to sit with uncertainty without becoming unsettled. Libra learns that intervention doesn't always create harmony. Sometimes choosing not to intervene is the most balanced response of all. In that silence, you may sense a new kind of steadiness. Not the steadiness of having everything resolved, but the steadiness of no longer being pulled by the urge to react immediately. You trust that what needs to be said will arrive at the right time, and that what doesn't need to be said has its reason for remaining unspoken. Perhaps this is when Libra understands that calmness isn't suppression. It's the result of having lived long enough to know that not every moment needs an exclamation point. Some moments only require a true pause, a space where you allow yourself to be fully present without defense, without hurry. And in that quiet moment, you lose nothing. On the contrary, you keep what matters most: inner clarity, self-respect, in how you face the truth, and the ability to move forward without carrying the residue of reactions that never had the chance to settle. A decision forms in a way very different from what most people imagine. It doesn't arrive with an announcement. It doesn't require immediate action to prove that it's real. For Libra, the most important decisions are often made in silence when no one else is watching, except you. After everything you've seen and everything you've felt, there comes a deeply personal moment when you no longer need the outside world to weigh in. Not because you've shut yourself off, but because things have become clear enough that you're no longer scattered. The sounds around you still exist, but they no longer enter your inner space. Libra is used to weighing things carefully, seeing every side. You understand that every choice carries consequences, and that's why you rarely rush. But this decision doesn't come from prolonged analysis. It comes from a quiet agreement between what you feel and what you know. You can no longer carry with you. There's no dramatic moment, no sense of winning or losing, just a very small shift, like redistributing your weight after standing off balance for far too long. You don't need to explain your choice to anyone. You don't feel the need to be understood right away. Clarity, at this point, doesn't require witnesses to be valid. Deep down, Libra begins to recognize that some things were held on to out of habit out of softness, or out of a desire to keep everything looking fine. But when the inner scale naturally tilts, you understand that letting go isn't abandoning responsibility. It's returning things to where they truly belong, especially when they no longer do. This decision doesn't make you colder. Quite the opposite. It brings a deeply human sense of relief. You no longer have to strain yourself to preserve harmony. By sacrificing honesty with yourself, you begin to respect your own limits as a natural part of maturity, not as a defensive barrier. From the outside, no one may notice what has changed. You speak the same way. You show up as before. But inside, you've crossed an important threshold, not between right and wrong, but between living on reflex and living with intention. This quiet decision doesn't ask you to act immediately. It simply shapes how you will respond. Moving forward, you become more selective with where your time goes. You listen to your body and your emotions with a renewed sense of respect, and you no longer feel guilty for placing yourself where balance is needed. What's admirable about Libra is that you don't turn this decision into a weapon or a declaration. You don't need to prove that you've changed. You simply live differently in a way that's more aligned with your inner values, and that quiet consistency is what gives it lasting strength. Perhaps the most important decision in this phase isn't about what you will do next, but about what you will no longer do. No longer holding on to things that have lost their center. No longer explaining yourself to those who aren't truly listening. No longer staying in places that require you to make yourself smaller just to keep things balanced. Once the inner scale has settled where it belongs, there's no need to push it further. You only need to keep it from being pulled back by old habits. And in the silence of that decision, Libra begins to move in a new direction, not loudly, not for display, but far more steady than ever before. As tomorrow slowly comes to a close, Libra may notice something very different from what you once worried about. There is no sense of emptiness, no hollow feeling like something important has been lost. Instead, there's a lighter state, similar to stepping out of a closed room and realizing you had grown used to breathing less air for far too long. The news that arrived didn't come to take anything from you. It didn't cut away. It didn't strip anything from your life. It simply clarified the boundary between what you held onto out of habit and what truly still fits, the person you are now. And once that boundary becomes visible, you no longer need to keep sustaining things that have already drifted off their natural course. Libra often fears imbalance, yet this moment reveals another truth. That clarity can sometimes feel safer than holding everything. In an uneasy middle ground, you no longer second-guess yourself, no longer wonder if you misunderstood, misread, or reacted too strongly. Everything stays still long enough for you to see its true shape. A quiet sense of agency returns, not the kind that announces itself, but the feeling that you're holding your choices again. From the inside, you can move forward without over-explaining. You can pause when needed without carrying that familiar guilt. And most importantly, you're no longer being guided by things that were never fully spoken. Tomorrow doesn't end in a dramatic climax. It ends in steadiness, a steadiness that doesn't come from everything being perfect, but from no longer resisting what is already present. Libra begins to understand that peace of mind isn't the result of keeping everyone satisfied, but the result of not betraying your own honest perception. In this state, you don't need to look back too often, not because the past lacks meaning, but because you've already taken what you needed from it. The unclear spaces that once pulled you backward no longer carry the same weight. You can remember them without feeling held in place, and that's how you know you've moved into a different position within your journey. Libra doesn't become more closed off after this experience. Instead, you open in a more grounded way. You become more selective about connection. You listen more carefully before offering trust, and you no longer rush to fill silence just to escape its presence. Silence now isn't something to avoid. It's a space where you return to balance. The close of tomorrow isn't the end of a story. It's like closing a chapter you've read long enough to understand and calmly setting it down. No loud sounds, no dramatic farewell, just a quiet agreement within yourself that it's time to continue with lighter baggage and clearer sight. And perhaps the most valuable thing this news offered wasn't its content, but the way you received it. You weren't swept away. You weren't frozen. You remained in the middle, steady, aware enough to face the truth, and gentle enough not to judge yourself. When everything settles, Libra moves forward, not with the feeling of winning or losing, but with the feeling of understanding. Understanding what you've walked through, understanding where you now stand, and understanding that from here on, you can continue your path without being pulled back by what was never spoken.